you found the last 5 weeks at home with your children? Now, if you have a child with ADHD, have you had a few problems? Have there been sibling interactions, fighting, rivalry? I kind of guess, it's par for the course anyway with children. We kind of expect children to so-called fight amongst themselves. I heard an interesting presentation by a psychologist that seemed to indicate that you only start to really get on with your siblings when you're in your 30s. So I suppose it's a competition, an evolutionary competition between competition for resources, your parents, the vying for the attention. I would say that one of the things to think about with sibling rivalry, and particularly children with ADHD, this could apply to difficulty at school with friends that they have. Someone with ADHD behaves as though they are 30% younger. So if you've got a 10-year-old, they're behaving like a 7-year-old. And if you've got a 5-year-old, then they are behaving like a child who's 4 or 4.5. So you've got to think about having a child who is unable to have the maturity to interact according to what you'd expect for their age. They are unable to have that self-awareness, to look at the way they are behaving and reflect. Look at themselves, the way they're interacting with other members of your family, with yourselves or with their brother or sister. Sometimes we just expect, boys will be boys. I often smile and say, fortunately for boys and men, women have such a low expectation of us. And it's not necessarily normal to have a child, particularly if it's a boy, who is behaving in a kind of an immature way, and all that constant interaction, fighting, argumentativeness. One of the other things to think about is children with oppositional defiant disorder. It can be a hugely disruptive problem. Those are children that are constantly, they have enormous difficulty with the emotional regulation. They're constantly arguing. They don't see the positive side of things. They constantly want to have the last say. They don't have this ability to see the other side. They don't have the ability to inhibit the emotional needs. They want things done now. They live in the now. They don't have the ability to have a sense of time. They can't think about the fact that if there is mutual respect and invest a bit of time and effort, that they're going to benefit in the future with the relationship. If you can't see the future, and if you don't learn from the past with hindsight, you're unable to move forward. You don't see the reason. You don't often see your behavior. You don't have that ability to step back and see the big picture. And they get overwhelmed by tasks and problems that are too big. So if there is a large age gap, often these things are a lot easier. But if children are quite close in age or they're a couple of years behind, emotionally, what we call executive age, you might have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and your 8-year-old seems more mature. There's a lot of competition. So I think from a parent's point of view is to help that sibling rivalry, you need to help them understand and talk. You've got to have very clear guidelines. You've got to be able to lay out and be in charge. It's like any organization or company. If there isn't somebody in charge, or you're not in charge as a parent, your children are. You need to take control. And medication is the cornerstone of the management of ADHD. Don't forget to give the medication early in the morning. Make sure that the difficult period after school is managed well. Making sure that if there are the two siblings, that they do their work separately. They have their kind of chores that they've got to do. There's equality, there's equal treatment by you as parents. And making sure that they exercise. Children that exercise, expend energy, are more in control. Make sure that they take their medication at the weekends. Don't forget that. Only so often I hear parents, they have this perception that the medication, there's a bit of a grudge. And they think, I don't want to give it for me. Remember, if you're giving your child their medication, if they had epilepsy, or if they had diabetes, would you want them to fit at the weekend or their sugars to go out of control at the weekend? Being well managed with their medication helps mature that frontal part of the brain, which helps the executive age, which makes them a little bit more immature, makes them approximate and catch up. The longer they give their medication, the more consistent you give the medication, 7 days a week, you're going to accelerate the protection and maturity of the brain. I hope that helps.